over 3,000 young people. And that's so powerful. We're also home to the UN Foundation Next Generation Fellows and the Unlock the Future Coalition, which reaches almost 1 billion people worldwide. That's huge. These initiatives connect youth leaders from the largest youth-led organizations and the UN itself. You're not just spectators to the future. You are the designers, the architects of a better world. Your voice, your ideas, your passion, that's what's going to drive change. So let's try and picture this together with me. A world of peace and prosperity by 2030. Sounds incredible, right? This isn't just a dream. It's the promise of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, aka the SDGs, that 193 world leaders made together in 2015. These goals represent our collective hopes and dreams for a better world. But it's also time to fess up. We're only 15% there and have less than 7 years left to reach the finish line. Our progress has been slowed down by huge global challenges like climate change and the COVID-19 pandemic. But remember, every challenge presents an opportunity for innovation and transformation. And the UN is looking to shake things up with 2 global summits on the way. These 2 global summits, which we call the Twin Summits, are the SDG Summit this year and the Summit of the Future next year. For the SDG Summit coming up in a few days, world leaders will convene to check in on our global progress towards the SDGs. They'll take stock on where we are and chart the course to the finish line in 2030. In preparation for this global check-in, the Secretary General, the big man of the UN himself, has launched a global plan to rescue people and planet. He is urging all world leaders to come with concrete and tangible national and global commitments to turbocharge all 17 goals. The Secretary General is also organizing a summit of the future. This big event is like a follow-up to the 2023 SDG Summit, but with a slightly different agenda. Its focus will be to brainstorm how to design a massive upgrade to the UN system to tackle future challenges, not just now, but looking all the way to 2100. It will put in global plans for you, your children, and your great-grandchildren. And guess what? The UN and the world leaders can't achieve the SDGs alone or plan for the world in 2100. They need you. They need your ideas, your creativity, and your grit to overcome our current and future challenges. As we're days away from the SDG Summit, the Digital Engine Room has brought thousands of you together to mobilize for the SDG Summit. Our 8 thematic and dynamic action groups have been buzzing with activity. They serve as channels for innovation, networking, and dialogue on SDG solutions, from transforming education to tackling climate change, plugging directly into UN decision-making processes and milestones. The SDG Summit is one of these engine room moments, and you're right in it now, with our final milestone at COP28. But here's the big news. Over the last few months, members of the engine room have been part of a global campaign to share their commitments, what they would like to see world leaders make and deliver at the SDG Summit. And we're taking those challenges to the UN this Saturday. Now, we know you're all eager to hear more, so we thought, why not share a sneak peek with you of some of the most compelling and bold commitments made by young people that are coming out of the engine room. These ideas are fresh, they're innovative, and they're going to shake things up. But before we share the video, I invite you to join me in a moment of silence for our brothers and sisters in Morocco and Libya who've been devastated by a tragic earthquake and a dam collapse due to heavy rain. These disasters have claimed thousands of lives. In this moment, we remember not just the numbers, but the individual stories, like that of a 6-year-old Raja Asheri, the village math genius who loved solving problems way above her grade level. Let us stand together across miles, across borders, in unity with people of Morocco and Libya. In their suffering, may they find strength. In their loss, may they find hope. And in their despair, may they find comfort in knowing they do not stand alone. Please share this moment with me.
"2023 is a defining year. Our world faces challenges that can no longer be ignored. International cooperation is more crucial than ever. Young people are leading the charge, demanding action and driving change. The UN Secretary General has called for a rescue plan for people and planet at the 2023 SDG Summit. All 17 goals will be under review, setting the stage for inclusive and sustainable transformation. This year, over 2,500 young people across the networks of UN Foundation and the Unlock the Future Coalition have launched their SDG innovations and set their own challenges to world leaders on the SDG commitments they want to see delivered by 2030. They are pushing for a better future for all people, current and future generations.
I'm calling on world leaders to invest in ending extreme poverty now for justice for all future and current generations.
My challenge to world leaders is to prioritize investment in education and vocational training.
Education is important, be it formal or informal. Students in some areas don't have easy access to education, and there are still students who are discriminated against in achieving their educational rights.
My vision in 2030 includes the establishment of proactive labor market policies to foster an environment where young professionals are appreciated for who we are, not just where we've been.
Mi llamado a los estados y futuros líderes es aunar los esfuerzos para impulsar la acción climática, para crear sistemas económicos y políticos más equitativos. Es importante que las mujeres no aparezcan como víctimas del cambio climático, sino como agentes de cambio.
A challenge to world leaders would be to take bold and decisive action on climate change. This includes transitioning to renewable energy sources, promoting energy efficiency, and phasing out fossil fuel subsidies.
We must also amplify our peace-building efforts by investing in conflict resolution programs that help build resilience against future conflicts and contribute to the establishment of lasting peace.
2023 is a moment to celebrate and be brave. With young people leading the way, the UN will deliver for people and planet. Young people's engagement in multilateralism is vital for achieving the 2030 agenda. The next 3 years are crucial. Every delay, shortfall, and missed opportunity affects the lives of young people worldwide. For every child denied education, every girl's dream deferred, and every young person facing poverty, the stakes couldn't be higher. It's time to act. Together, we can make a difference in the next 3 years leading up to the 2027 SDG Summit. Let's shape a future of equality, justice, and peace.
It's time for change, leaders.
It's a choice that we can make by 2030.
What is at stake here is larger than our differences.
The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of the dreams. To that I say, youth, let's dream together.
Your voice matters. Let's make history in 2023. Join us at the 2023 SDG Summit. Together, we can build a better world.
That was incredible. Thank you for sharing that video. And I felt so inspired just in those few minutes, and I hope you do too. Those challenges will be shared to world leaders at two big moments at the SDG Summit that we're convening. The first is our official side event at the UN this Saturday, which we hope all of you will be able to participate online or in person. This special and public event is supported by the Unlock the Future Coalition, which unites some of the world's largest youth organizations around the world with one mission: to help young people like you become tomorrow's leaders. The CEOs and young people of the young leaders of the Unlock Coalition are also meeting in a small huddle to discuss how to design a funders collective to unlock financing for young people to tackle the SDGs and deliver a brighter future. We'll be reporting back to the engine room on both of these meetings right after the SDG Summit, so hang tight on updates from us soon. We also wanted to share or pre-share a sneak preview of a report that will be coming out during the SDG Summit, which is developed and designed by the Unlock Coalition, which focuses on the road to 2100. So what's this paper all about? It's not just a plan for the future, it's a strategy to speed up a final push towards implementing the SDGs, to inspire global change, take action for the future, and ensure no generation is left behind, most especially young people and future generations. Together, we're going to rally political support and accountability, explore 21 trajectories looking into future scenarios. We'll activate a generation of young change makers, yes, that's you, to design that very future and come up with game-changing ideas and innovations. We'll also jumpstart the engine room for the future, taking this mobilization into the next and bring everyone's collective intelligence to plan for 2100. And we'll also inspire through storytelling, using creative and various mediums to really bring the world of 2100 to life, reflecting your collective dreams and hopes for the future. If this all sounds super interesting or remotely interesting to you, how about helping us bring the 2100 roadmap to life? We've got some early bird tickets to join the engine room for the future next year that builds on the engine room that you're in right now to start participating in this road to design 2100. Scanning the QR code on the screen will help secure an early spot. Now, with all that framing done and dusted, we're ready to hit the road with the next segment. We are so incredibly lucky to have a very, very special guest with us. Please join me in welcoming Her Royal Highness Princess Haya. She's not just a princess by title, but also a champion of many causes close to our hearts. Princess Haya is also a humanitarian, a United Nations messenger of peace, and a former Olympic athlete. She's devoted her life to helping young people, particularly in the areas of health, education, extreme poverty, and ending hunger. She's led numerous relief missions to countries like Haiti, South Sudan, Syria, Indonesia, and Nepal. Princess Haya inspires all of us that with her dedication to making the world a better place, she shows us that no matter who you are or where you come from, you can make a difference. Your Royal Highness, I hand the floor directly to you.
Thank you. I'm honored and humbled to be part of this prelude to the 2023 SDG Summit. The last few years of my life have given me a new perspective. I've not spoken in a long time, and I sincerely hope that I can be of some service to you all today. For a quarter of a century, the United Nations Foundation has played an extraordinary role in the advancement of the United Nations. Together, they demonstrate the power of unity in resolving disputes and achieving progress in the darkest of times. The 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which all 191 United Nations member states signed up to in 2015, have seen some progress. Per the report of the United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, the incidence of extreme poverty and child mortality rates has continued to decline. Advancements have been made against HIV and hepatitis. Some countries are meeting gender equality targets, and electricity access in the developing world has risen, with the share of renewables in energy mixing growing. Globally, unemployment has dropped back to levels before the 2008 financial crisis, and the proportion of protected marine waters under national jurisdiction has more than doubled in 5 years. I want to acknowledge the UN Foundation in particular for its role in all that has been achieved. But the Secretary General also notes that progress has been slow and fragile. His recent report sounds an alarm, noting that of the roughly 140 targets for which data is available, only about 12% are on track. More than half, although showing some progress, are moderately or severely off track, and some 30% have either seen no movement or regressed below the 2015 baseline. The Secretary General notes that under the current trends, 575 million people will still be living in extreme poverty in 2030, and only about 1/3 of the countries will meet the target of halving national poverty levels. Furthermore, in 2015, 589 million people were experiencing hunger, and by 2021, that number had risen to 768 million. Projections show that by 2030, approximately 670 million people will still be facing hunger, 8% of the world's population, the same as in 2015. Food prices remain higher in more countries than in the period between 2015 and 2019. Secretary General Guterres has pointed out that at current rates of progress, it will take 286 years to close gender gaps in legal protection and remove discriminatory laws. And in the area of education, the impact of years of underinvestment and learning losses during the COVID pandemic are such that by 2030, some 84 million children will be out of school. 300 million children or young people who attend school will leave unable to read and write. The most severe warnings come on climate change. Forecasts say that we will not stop deforestation for another 25 years, and we can expect mass extinction of species. Renewable energy sources will continue to supply only a fraction of global needs. Although the most recent trends here are surprisingly good as renewable costs become far more competitive, the window is closing on keeping the global rise in temperatures under 1.5 centigrade. It's easy to get lost in a sea of numbers, but behind each and every statistic is a human life or livelihood worth fighting for. Today we're fighting for the mother in Libya frantically searching for her child after the floods, the father in Marrakesh desperately trying to make ends meet after the earthquake destroyed his business, a family in Sudan trying to stretch meals to an extra day, children in Palestine risking their lives to play outside. A teenage girl in Afghanistan can no longer access education. An elderly couple in Ukraine facing another freezing winter as bombardments continue to decimate the life they once knew. And we're fighting for the unsung heroes who toil each and every day around the world, risking their own lives on behalf of the United Nations and so many other organizations to keep hope alive. The United Nations Secretary General has recently called on the G20 to show leadership to save the SDGs. He has also taken a lead in putting forward concrete measures intended to yield immediate benefits. Together, these actions are intended to catalyze SDG progress and help developing economies invest in key transition areas across energy, food systems, digital, education, health, decent jobs, and social protection. The Secretary General's measures include an SDG stimulus of at least $500 billion per year, an effective debt workout mechanism to support payment suspensions, longer lending terms, and lower rates on fairer terms to developing countries in distress, a meaningful capitalization and change in the business model of multilateral development banks to be able to massively leverage private finance at reasonable cost to developing countries, a more substantive rechanneling of unused special drawing rights to increase liquidity where it's most needed, and a shift in subsidies away from fossil fuels to more sustainable and productive uses. But it is clear that the responsibility for progress does not lie solely with the UN itself, or with governments, or big business. The onus to lean in and make a difference is on each and every one of us, which is, I believe, why we're all here today. I'm immensely grateful for the privilege of being among so many brilliant, vibrant, and innovative young people. I know that you're all acutely aware, as I am, that we meet at a time of great tension. Our world is faced with straining economic, political, and commercial fault lines which overlay deep historical forces and which feature alongside a trend towards unprecedented interpersonal and intergenerational ruptures. Even our planet herself seems exhausted by our lack of respect for her. And while heightened connectivity has dissolved borders and brought attention to once far-off causes, allowing examples of coexistence and cooperation to be easily shared and celebrated, it has also underpinned a polarization in thinking, an evaporating middle ground, and a reduced tolerance for differences. Social media is also misused to facilitate harmful bullying and abuse with lasting ramifications for the world's youngest population. We live in a time of escalating unease and conflict, helpless and blameless as we may each sometimes feel. The world is now looking to us for solutions. I'm reminded of the Billy Joel song, recently updated by Fall Out Boy, about how each generation feels that things are getting worse and the troubles of the past are ignored, while the lyrics list scientific, cultural, and political events. The chorus goes like this: "We didn't start the fire. It was always burning since the world's been turning. We didn't start the fire. No, we didn't light it, but we tried to fight it." And the main message continues, "But when we're gone, it will still burn on and on and on and on." Like all of you, I carry with me today the hopes and dreams of my children and of future generations. And like you, I know that the fires we face right now simply cannot be allowed to keep burning. Even if we didn't start them, being on the right side of history means becoming the generation that finds a way to break the cycle, setting humanity and the planet on a new course. The roadmap exists. The SDGs make it clear what needs to be done. The harder part is how. But everybody joining us today is already at the forefront of the change that is required. And I am confident that you have the ideas, the energy and the tenacity to see it through. Before I hand the floor to the many brilliant speakers you will hear from throughout this event, may I leave you with a few final words of wisdom and encouragement from a great man, a man with unwavering belief in the potential of young people, enormous confidence in the United Nations, and true conviction in the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, whom he personally appointed to lead UNHCR. A man with enduring faith in humanity, the late Kofi Annan. You are never too young to lead, and you should never doubt your capacity to triumph where others have not. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Royal Highness, for those incredibly powerful words, for putting humanity back in the SDGs and reminding us that the SDGs are fighting for justice for all people, especially unsung heroes that are often the youngest of us all. It's through global cooperation, as you've described, that we can fight the fires on behalf of next and future generations. Thank you. As we move to the next session, I'd love to hand over to my colleague, Inez, to hear from young people on their big dreams for the SDGs and how we can speed up progress. Inez, over to you.
Thank you, Harshani, and hello, changemakers. I am so excited that you're here and so grateful for our different speakers so far. I echo Harshani's gratitude to Princess Haya and look forward to hearing from the exciting lineup that we have coming up. I am Ines Yavad. I'm the lead Next Generation Fellow at the UN Foundation, and some of you may remember me from the Big Brainstorm, where I had the pleasure of moderating a few sessions. And I am confident that we can make an impact together. And I believe I am making an impact. And I would love for you to answer in the poll that's coming up on your screens if you believe or you feel that you can make an impact to help accelerate the SDGs. Now, remember, there is no right or wrong answer. Please answer truthfully. As you do that, I will present a few of our speakers coming up. We have two speakers that will share 5-minute inspirational insights into their path to impact. We've called this segment Young Voices, Big Ideas. And we know that if you're watching, you have them too. So please do write in the chat and keep interacting on your big ideas. And remember that you can join the engine room to connect with other young people who have bold ideas too. Our speakers, who I know you want to hear from, are leaders in the 2030 agenda. So as I'm seeing the answers coming up, I see loads of people are super confident that they can achieve the SDGs, and that's exactly the energy we want in the room. But I know we have a packed agenda, so we're actually going to put a new poll up for you. If you weren't able to answer that first question, don't worry, there are more questions to come. And the second question for you is, how important do you think it is for young people to take a leadership role in the 2030 agenda? The young people that we're going to hear today have those leadership roles, and we'll be discussing how they found their path to impact in accelerating the SDGs, their innovative messages, approach, and solutions to speed up the 2030 agenda, how we can maintain our motivation and resilience as a young change maker. And I'm sure you will be motivated after these fantastic interventions. Now to our speakers. Unfortunately, you may have seen some promo that we were going to have Alice join us. She wasn't able to join us, but we hope that you will join her in mobilization via social media and encourage her in her change-making journey too. But we do have two amazing advocates. So let's start with Louisa. And as I'm seeing the answers, we should definitely take action, and leadership is, but the one that most people are answering is also making space for us to kind of grow up and be young, which I definitely think is important. Louisa is a 27-year-old climate activist who you'll see pop up on screen. She's from Germany. And in 2022, Time listed her as one of the 100 global emerging voices. Louisa Neubauer has been involved in organizing 12 global climate strikes. And in 2021, she and others won a climate litigation case against the German government, which has been considered a historic ruling. So I won't speak anymore. And Louisa, I will turn straight to you for your 5-minute intervention.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure listening to all the powerful words already. My name is Luisa. I am from Germany, so I grew up in one of the most privileged parts of the world. And for the last 5 years, together with thousands of others, youth activists, young people from Germany, from Europe, but from all over the world as well, we've been mobilizing masses again and again and again to lobby for change, to build real power that can challenge destructive systems. And I brought three learnings along that I would love to pass on. Three things that I learned in those 5 years. Number one is my activism journey didn't really start with the climate, but it really started with global equality. So I went to places like Namibia, I met friends in Tanzania, and what I witnessed in a lot of the great developments that we saw across the world is that no matter how hard people fought for real change, for real progress, for the world's poorest, for those who are the most vulnerable, for those who are facing extreme hunger and poverty and so on, no matter how hard people were fighting, the climate crisis would smash again and again and again so many of these great developments. So at that very moment that women got empowered and girls got to go to school, finally we saw that environmental changes, environmental damages, had the potential to really, to really take a hit on those who had just started fighting. So I went back home to Germany and I realized when we want global equality and more importantly, global equity to happen, when we want to reach the SDGs, when we want a life of dignity and freedom and safety and security for everyone, places in the global north, the most privileged, the richest countries in the world, they need to get their stuff together. They need to get down with their emissions. It's the emissions caused by the global north that is undermining the lives of those in many other places around the world. Yet when I came back to Germany, I was invited to speak in places, I was invited to shake hands with ministers, and I realized very quickly that asking youth to come to a table can be a real invitation, but it can just as well be an empty scam of having young people in the room without ever challenging what kind of difference that could make. So my first lesson that I learned really quickly is there is some kind of handshake activism, I would call it, where young people are invited to be in the room to look good, to give everyone a good feeling that we are all so equal, that we have a youth representative sharing some inspiration ideas without ever allowing young people to actually make a change, to actually challenge structures, to actually be included, and not just the end of a decision, the presentation of the decision, but really everything, the whole process from the beginning on. So don't get stuck up, don't get caught up in ideas and in invitation that sound good, but are just there to keep us low. Number two was I realized very quickly when we want to fight for climate justice, it is not just about having the good ideas. It is about building power behind those ideas, about building networks and movements and mobilizations and a dream, a collective dream that is powerful enough to challenge the status quo, to challenge the destructive systems in all of our lives. So I didn't go by myself and I didn't just point at some good ideas of how to, get down with our mission and reach the SDGs, but we built power together by creating a unity, by creating a collective, by creating broad alliances. And number three, and I think that is maybe what we're here for together as well, what the SDG Summit is about. We young people, we tend to look up at those more powerful, at the older people, the wiser people, those who have a say in the room, and we tend to try to be close to them. And what I realized in the last 5 years, the most powerful thing that we can do is not just look at the next older person and the next wiser person, the person one position up, but to look left and right, because our true allies, they're sitting next to us, that are our friends in our community and the people in our generations that are willing to create real change for everyone. And they're not just there to brag about the past or deny the future, but they're there for the real stuff. They're in it for the long run. So yeah, I think on that point, let's get together and fight for real change. And on September 15th, this Friday, this upcoming Friday, we will be all around the world fighting for climate justice and dignity for all. And please do join us on the streets when we call for an end of all fossil fuels.
Thank you so much, Louisa. A big fan of your work. And I take away the 3 points that you mentioned. As young people, we don't just want to look good. We want to be allowed to make a change and be able to challenge structures. We also need to create alliances and to look to our left and right, as you just said, because I loved how you put it. Our true allies are right next to us. And a reminder for the climate march that's happening. I believe there's one also happening on Sunday, at least here in New York. So there will be many moments to mobilize throughout the next coming days. So do encourage you to join that. And I'm sure we can pop some links in the chat for those who want to know more about that. Thank you so much, Lisa, for joining. And I do want to introduce our next speaker, Temilade Salami, who's the founder of and the executive director of the Eco Champions, one of Africa's largest networks of young environmentalists and activists. Her work has been featured on local and international news, and she was recommended to help UNESCO co-develop guidelines to support policymakers in integrating climate education into education policies and curricula. So without further ado, Temilade, over to you.
Thank you so much, Ines, and thank you so much, Louisa, for your contributions. I'm really excited to be here and very happy that a lot of young people on the call. My name is Temilade Salami, as briefly introduced, and I run an organization called Eco Champions back in Africa. I work as a climate education and communications professional. And I would say that my journey into the climate change space was actually accidental. I wanted to become a doctor, and I later changed my course to an environmental course. And I went for a field trip during one of my courses and saw a very dirty community that had waste management issues. I was really uncomfortable about it. So I went back to my school and gathered about 100 people to go back to the community to go clean up the community. Well, beyond cleanup, we also partnered with other youth organizations to help them recycle some of their plastics that were blocking the drainage system. So I wouldn't say it was passion that led me there. It was just simply seeing a problem and wanting to, fix it and just provide solution. And before I knew it, this literally grew into a full-blown organization that I've been running for the past 6 years. So I'm really excited to be talking about this. And, we're talking about the SDGs today, and my innovative message, approach, and solution to speed up the 2030 agenda, it will be that every global solution that we have needs to be localized. Although the SDGs are global goals, every country must determine what the SDG means to them at the local and national level, and this must include young people. The real work is at home. So even if we gather in New York, we're supposed to take those solutions back to our countries, our local communities, and effect change. So we need more local actions that will culminate into global results. Secondly, we need collaboration, financing, and action rather than promises. I think over time, we do a lot of talk, but in the end, we need, finance to move forward. We need finance for countries that are experiencing climate change devastation and countries that are experiencing war, right? So it's very important that when we talk about these things, we also talk about the finance and collaboration, building synergies across board, either multilateral organizations, individual organizations, and supporting young people to be able to take action. The third one is we must start to meaningfully engage young people, like Louisa said. And if you're in the climate change space, you know that one of the most rampant things you would see is the whole handshaking thing, where youth are afterthoughts. Oh, let's bring them on board after we've thought about the whole thing. But just like the SDG Summit from the beginning, this curtain raiser we're talking about, from the beginning, you could see how they reached out to a lot of young people, how everything is surrounded with people being involved, and people that are being involved are young people, from Ines, who is moderating this session. So it's super important that we do not just tokenize young people's engagement when we sit at the table. We need to involve them right from the beginning. And so far, I think it's also important to say that a lot of young people have been on the front line for a lot of time, and it's super important to know that we need to keep ourselves motivated. We also need to take inspiration from the communities around us. So some of the things that keeps me going, I'm very aware of the consequences of inaction. So when I see things in my community, I can imagine what could happen if I don't take action. So this is what continues to spur me to action. And I also belong to communities of young people who work in the climate change space, and their continuous dedication to their work continuously inspires me. So the last one is I take breaks, re-strategize and refresh. I believe so well that I'm not supposed to change the world alone. So there are thousands of young people like me out there who can do just as amazing as I'm doing right here in Nigeria and in Africa. So it's super important to know that you are not alone, and it's okay to take breaks, re-strategize, refresh, and belong to community. And the last thing I'll say on this call, most of the time we've been referred to as leaders of tomorrow, the future, young people for the future. We keep using things that are in the future. We keep using the word future, but it's very important to know that every decision that will be taken in New York this coming week, every meeting has to do with our future, has to do with the future of the generations coming after us. So you are literally the leaders of today. I am the leader of today. So don't let anyone place you in that mindset of, you belong to tomorrow. So whatever you can do in your community right now to effect change, please just go ahead to do it, because it is those little sprinkle of change that we have on the local level that comes together to become global results. So keep making change, and I'm really so excited to see all the amazing young people here on this call. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for being with us. And there were so many points in what you said, but some of the ones I took down was definitely localizing the SDGs. And I see so many young people already doing that, and we should work better together to kind of find the things that we're doing in our different countries. And a great way to do that, plug again, is the engine room. Financing is important. Yes, we will continue to say it. And as Harshani mentioned earlier, leaders from different NGOs of our Unlock the Future Coalition will be joining in New York to discuss a potential funders collective. So stay tuned on that. And you also mentioned youth not being an afterthought. And I think that's very important, because oftentimes we're invited at the last minute to certain things. So let's continue raising our voices and remembering that we're not alone. We're in this together. So thank you so much, Louisa and Temilade. That was fantastic. And I feel inspired. I hope that everyone on this call does too. And another way to get inspiration is definitely through art. And I'm so glad I get to introduce Pepita, who I got to work with a couple of years ago when I was at Restless Development. And her piece called Time particularly struck me. And today she's here again to bring us a good dose of inspiration for action. Pepita is a multifaceted artist whose talents converge at the intersection of poetry, voice acting, and activism. And her written work has been featured in Poetry Africa and Writer's Space Africa magazine. But on top of her artistic side, she is also a practicing lawyer and is delving into academic research with a Master of Science in Africa and International Development at the University of Edinburgh that further helps inform her art. So I think she's a brilliant person to bring on now, and we are sure to be inspired by you, Pepita. Thank you so much for joining us. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Inez, for such a lovely introduction. So hi, everyone. My name is Pepita Mwanga. I am Tanzanian, and I'm a poet, amongst other things, like you heard. Just a bit about myself. As an artist, I like to use my art as a form of activism, bringing attention to matters that are marginalized and minimized, and adding volume to things that are already being spoken about. And I like to write about various topics such as youth empowerment, women empowerment, self-love, love, gender-based violence. And you can access my work through my Instagram. My handle is @poetpeppa. I will put that in the chat. I am so excited to be here in this event that celebrates the youth's commitment to sustainable development. And it gives us a platform to share our vision. So in line with this, as Inez said, my art today, my poem titled The Time Is Now, is a call to action for sustainable development. It draws on the urgency of doing something now, as we all are here now. So it calls the youth to take action, whatever action it may be, but to do so Now, as time is of the essence, I had an absolute blast preparing for this performance as it kept unfolding itself with deeper meaning each time. It is my hope that you enjoy it even half as much too. And with that being said, I give you The Time Is Now. I watch the clock ticking and talking, mocking my very existence, measuring my beginning, racing to the end of every evening, reminding me that I cannot live the same second twice, no matter how much I wish it otherwise. But the same clock ticks in every abode. From the young to the elder, it is never slowed. From the penthouse to the shack of the less endowed, it will tick, it will mock, whether or not it is allowed. Whether or not we stand still, whether or not we take will. Whether our hearts are racing, whether in circles we are pacing, it will tick, it will talk, it will knock, it will run, it will walk, it will toss, it will turn you, but it will not stop. It will wash you on the shores of tomorrow, an isle of joy or a pit of sorrow, depending on what we do now. So, what shall we do now? What can we do now? If not you, if not I, who will do it now? O ye of great wealth, O ye of great youth. You need not be in a high tower or possessing high power or sitting behind an executive desk signing billions in checks, O ye of great wealth. All you need is within. If you will, there's always a way. You are the silver lining that you seek, a voice for the mute and strength for the weak, O ye of great youth. But if not me and you, then who? There must be something that we can do to make a plan to preserve this planet. It's our home, and we have no planet B. Mother Nature has been crying for long, and we cannot keep playing the fiddle to her last song. A better tomorrow has to begin now. We might not be here, but somebody will. We can at least make sure they have a place to stay, a place to play, a place to pray, some water to drink before it all dissipates in a blink. It is a vision that you and I can bring. But if not you, then who? To love thy neighbor, to lend a helping hand to those drowning in quicksand, to give a glass of hope to those thirsting for a new horizon. If not you, if not I, then who? If not here, then where? And if not now, then when? Thank you.
Wow, Pepita, I don't know if you can see the chat, but it's on fire. People saying it's so powerful, beautiful words. Please do scroll through it, and I can see so many claps coming through. And this is a perfect segue because the chat is on fire, and the next segment is called Fireside Chat. Don't beat me up for that. I had to say it. And here we're going to move just beyond talk and actually delve into youth-led action plans for accelerating the SDGs and how we can join in preparing for the 2100 agenda process. We'll be having a chat with a few amazing change makers, which I'll briefly introduce before we jump right in. I'm starting off with Deja Fox, who is 23 years old and the founder of Gen Z Girl Gang. She's a graduate from Columbia University and a digital creator with board models who got her to start advocating for reproductive justice after experiencing homelessness in her teenage years. At just 19, she worked for Kamala Harris as the influencer and surrogate strategist and became one of the youngest presidential campaign staffers in history. Deja has also been the recipient of several awards, and as you can tell by all these bios, I had a hard time shortening them, and this is already probably half the length of Deja's amazing achievements. We also have someone with a similar name to mine. It's not the same name. In Spanish, we say tocaya, to say namesake. And I'm honored to share a similar name with Ineza Umuhoza Grace, who who is a renowned eco-feminist and global advocate for environmental and climate justice from Rwanda. She is the founder and CEO of Green Protector, protecting and preserving the environment. And in addition, she also co-founded the Loss and Damage Youth Coalition and serves as its global coordinator and also a member of the Loss and Damage Grant-Making Council. She is also a country negotiator since 2018 and a junior researcher on climate diplomacy, and has received amazing awards as well. As you can tell, these bios are impressive, but what better than hearing a bio than actually hearing from them themselves. I'm sure you want to hear from them. Also, remember, we have the Q&A where you can ask questions for the panel. And of course, keep your reactions coming in the chat. As I ask questions to the panel, we will have some polls pop up so that we can hear from you. So make sure you interact with those. So Deja, let me start with you. We need to turbocharge the SDGs in the 2030 agenda. And each person here has really harnessed the power of storytelling, art, fashion, community, technology to empower young people that you're working with in your own context to really talk to action. What lessons can the young leaders here today take from your innovative approach to activism?
Hi, everybody, and good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. Hey, Ineza. I want to start by saying that each and every one of us has a place in this work. Whether you are an incredible photographer, you have a mind for Excel sheets and details, you are a talented speaker or someone who prefers to be behind the scenes, if you have a little bit of money or a lot of money, there is a place for you. When I was first getting into this work, people would say, you know, you can give time, talent, or treasure. And I want to stress that each and every one of us has a unique talent, right? And that there is a place for that talent and a need for that talent within this movement. And so even if your place doesn't look like mine, right? Maybe it's not working in reproductive justice. Maybe it's not being on the streets. Maybe it's not creating content. Maybe it's not shifting narrative. Maybe you're activating in different ways. I think that's the beauty of it, right? That we need each and every one of us in different areas using our unique talents. And that being said, I also want to remind you all that I'm speaking to a room of young people, right? I'm 23 years old. My place in this movement has changed. What I'm able to offer has changed because my own gifts and talents and skills have changed over time. My platform has grown, right? And so I want to remind people that the way that you came into this work will change because you're going to change too. And I think that that's really powerful and just fine. So there's a place for everyone. Your skills, your talents are unique and they're necessary. And it's okay if your space in this movement changes over time.
That's very powerful. Thank you so much. As changemakers, we often feel like we're going to get boxed into something, but we can also change. And just referring to the poll that we shared earlier, I can see people are quite confident that we are taking action towards the Sustainable Development Goals, but more at grassroots level, and we really need to step it up and do everything we can on all levels. And I saw in that interaction, Deja and Ineza, it seems you've already met at some other point, which is fantastic. I realized that we didn't acknowledge that we were supposed to have someone else on this panel who may join us, hopefully, Eniolua Adeolua. So hopefully, if he joins, he will join us. But for now, Ineza, let me turn to you, and I would love to hear from you on the same question, but more on the side of community and how you've helped create that community and taking that action in your own space.
Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me. I'm so happy and grateful to be here. And yes, they're just one of my cool friends of the Gen Z, and I'm able to learn from her on how to keep the upbeat in the activities that we're doing. So what I can share is that it's not going to be easy. But I think that is a song that we all know, because a lot of time we are dealing with the processes that was designed before we were born. Barriers or principles that was there before we get even a chance to speak. And now, because we have a voice, we are trying to challenge the system. And once we challenge the system, we will not be failing to face people who are not able to embrace the change that we are bringing, because we are able to see the past mistake that happened the current solution we need to take. And then we are not only wanting to blame, we also want to be part of the solution. And that's the point that Deja was making, because everyone has a place to play. It's like we are a big puzzle, and each one of us is just one unique piece that's going to allow us to have a proper solution. And the only way that we are able to embrace, I think, is because we are the generation that is able to learn on how to redefine global solidarity, because we are able to stand as one, regardless of how human rights can be defined, or climate justice is going to be defined, or development is going to be defined. But we are able to stand in the right side of the planet, of the people, because we are the generation who have the access of information, and we don't want to be blamers only. We also want to, I like to use my sister's example. She was a bit like, you can blame your parents or the mistake they're doing by also telling them how they can better be a parent on you, because you are growing. So you have a better chance to learn to do good at the younger age and keep doing good, so that the next generation will be having, a less fight than the one we are having right now. So they're able to actually have an access on the better planet. And the other thing is that, especially from young people from the global south perspective, is going to be a little bit much more harder, because the access opportunity is going to be limited. But please don't give up, because leaders of nowadays, and I'm speaking here on my country experience as a Rwandan young person, leaders nowadays are able to listen to the young people, and they're able to acknowledge the fact that young people are active stakeholders. That's why we get to be part of the negotiation process. We get to chance to design our policy on our country level, but also conduct action. And we really do conduct action, even if sometimes people be like, oh, but youth action is going to be minimal, because we are not able maybe to catalyze maybe trillions or millions of dollars. But our small action counts much more, because we are able to act from a place of inspiration and a place of hope and a place of gratitude, because we know what we are fighting for. We don't want to get richer. We just want to have an opportunity to be able to have better today, so that tomorrow we can, have a life in a way.
Thank you, Inez. And what stuck with me from what you said is the part about blame and solutions, and really we don't just want to blame people, we want to be part of those solutions. And I know you have both been given multiple awards and recognized for your work on the solutions that you've been working on by National Geographic, the Global Citizen Prize, and the millions of people who can follow you on social media. We would love to hear what you've learned through the journey about communicating your message to the masses. And another poll came up as you were speaking, and most of the people on this poll agree that it's extremely important to create content and communicate about what we're doing. So maybe to switch up the order, Inez, I'll come to you first. But what are your thoughts on what you've learned on communicating your message to different people?
That is a very good question. I will answer based on my experience. So I'm one of those persons who really do not like to use pictures or camera and stuff, because I always felt like I'm not shy, but I don't like to be on a picture or in a video. Until in 2020, I was introduced with the National Geographic Society, and I literally went into a class to learn that the camera is not a bad thing to be on my face. But the reason why I became more comfortable is because that I understood that me sharing my voice, me being part of a video or part of a picture, it just is going to be like a statement of a voice to the other community, a voice of hope, because I'm able to stand as one person, but I can be an inspiration for a young woman, or a leader who's able to see that youth are not only taking the space, but we are also owning the space as we communicate our action. And then the communication also came into the fact that once you are able to share what you're up to, what you're going to, you can create, you can spread hope much more easily in a tangible way, especially when it's coming from the youth perspective, because youth are able to be like, oh, in this area, things worked. So why can it work in my case? And then they're able to connect and learn from each other, but also be able to have like a kind of like a list of examples that you can use when you're making a blaming case to the leaders. Be like, oh, Deja did this, or Ineza did this. It works, so why can it work in my own context? So we are able to create that force that is able to challenge the system by being much more fact-based and proven record of how things have been working. So that would be how I can answer.
And I loved how you linked the content creation that you do with the community building, and that it helps build community, and people see that you did this so they can too. And hopefully those that are hearing now feel inspired to do the same. But Deja, I would love to come to you also to hear from you on your learning of communicating your message to different people to drive change.
Sure. So a little bit about my origin story in this work. I was born and raised in Tucson, Arizona. I was raised by a single mom in government housing. And by the time I was 15, I moved out of my home because of issues of substance abuse. I experienced what 1 in 30 teens in the US do, and it's called hidden homelessness, which means not having a home of your own. And it was through that lens that I got really engaged in reproductive justice work. And it was through a very personal lens. I started fighting my school board for better sex education because they were leaving students like me behind, right? And then when I was 16, after already having some of that storytelling experience at a very local level, I stood up to my senator about birth control access. He had voted to repeal it for low-income folks like me, and it actually directly threatened the funding that I used. And in that moment, I stood up in front of maybe 1,000 people and told this story of homelessness, of need for this medical care, right? Reproductive care. And my dreams of wanting to be the first in my family to go to college, and the ways that those were interconnected. And the 1,000 people there heard it, but then the next day, a video of it had gone viral, and millions of people had heard it. I had requests to go live on CNN. I lobbied on Capitol Hill. And I share this to say that overnight, the power of social media and storytelling, right, went hand in hand to put me, a 16-year-old girl who was working at a gas station, who was living, kind of on her own, on even footing with a United States senator in the public discourse. It had an impact on people who saw me and said, I should use my voice in that way. It had an impact on policy. That senator is no longer a senator anymore. And I think it's had a long-standing impact on my own personal life and where I believe I fall within change-making work, and the ways I'm able to take up public space. And so I share that to say that we as young people, especially young people in this generation who have this unique ability to use social media in ways that older generations are not ready to or don't understand as organically as we do, we have an opportunity to shift narrative. And I think there's an incredibly important goal of shifting policy, 100%. But I also think we have to do culture change work to change policy. And we can do that through narrative building, through storytelling, and with social media as a tool. And each and every one of you has those unique skills. So I want to leave you with that encouragement. But I also want to remind you that, as we listed those awards and we talk about follower counts, that those markers do not make us exceptional from you in any way. They make us representative of the communities we come from, right? That we are reminded that opportunity is not distributed equally, but talent is. And there is so much talent in this room. So I'm really excited to see what you all go out and create.
Thank you so much, Deja. I'm sorry if you saw me laughing there because I was kind of making noises and like, I agree with you. And then other people in the room were just like, what is she just saying, making noises? But I really, really agree with you. And I think it's very important what you mentioned about being put on the same foothold as other people and not being seen as less. And that's something that Luisa and Camilade spoke to earlier, of young people being seen as equals. And the important point that you mentioned after that was the narrative building. And yes, it's important to have platforms, but we also need to work on our narratives and know what we want to share and who we're representing. Because although we're speaking here today, there are so many other young people that have brilliant ideas that we also need to try and support, elevate, and not always speak for, but also speak with. And with that in mind, do remember that anyone that's on this call, you can use the Q&A function to ask questions. We've seen some coming through, so I'll ask the last one, and then we'll come to questions from the people on this call. Both of you are very bold and courageous, and I would use those words to describe each of you for the way that you approach your work. But you sometimes redefine expectations, or you draw attention to your work, or persevere and resist in face of resistance. That is hard. And what would be your guidance for young leaders who are still in the process of finding and sharing their voice in those hard circumstances? And I'll switch it up again, and Deja, comes to you, because you just mentioned that earlier about how you grew up in a state of homelessness, and that was, I'm sure, very challenging, but made you also who you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have two pieces of advice for young people who are looking to share their voice or find their voice. The first is that I want you to know that you are an expert in your experience. You do not need to have a fancy degree or high title to be an expert in your experience, right? And so when you go and you stand in front of school board members or senators or folks at the UN, remember that you hold a kind of expertise that many of them do not. That if you are personally impacted by these issues you're talking about, you are an expert in them in a way that people cannot learn through books or studies or research, and you deserve to own that expertise. Only you have your story, and only you can share it. It is truly uniquely yours. And so I want you to feel ownership of that. The second thing I want you to remember is that as a storyteller, you should share what is uncomfortable, but not unsafe. I believe that young people, particularly young women of color, deserve so much more protection than we give them as change makers, right? That we are often asked to be at the front. We are often asked to give and share our stories and our personhood with very little protection offered on the other side. And so I want you all to share what is uncomfortable. It was very uncomfortable to share my experiences of homelessness while I was still living in them. Very uncomfortable to share those in front of my school board members. Very uncomfortable to talk about sex education, birth control in front of these authority figures. But it was not unsafe for me because I had backing of organizers who cared about me. I had been trained on how to tell my story and how to interact with the media. And I had built that muscle over time, and I felt confident and comfortable. But if I'd had that viral moment that I had when I was 16, when I was 15, when I was just, still doing that work at the very local school board level, that may have been an unsafe place for me to share my story at that time because I may have not been prepared. So give yourself the space and know that that limit of uncomfortable and unsafe will expand and grow, but it may also sometimes contract, and that's okay too. But it is 100% your story, only you have it. And it is also 100% up to you how you choose to share it.
Thank you, Deja. I could see nods, at least from those who are on the screen. And I know this is something you mentioned, Ineza, earlier about you having to learn that a camera wasn't a bad thing, or it's like being supported to be able to share your story and share your voice in the way that you are most comfortable with. So what would be your guidance to young leaders who are still looking to find their voice? And looking at the polls, it's kind of pretty much 30% for each. Some people have found their voice and are confident in using it. Others are still questioning themselves. Some are making progress. So what are your thoughts on how do you think they can start?
Yes, I was again answer using my my experience and what I think worked. The first is if you find your voice but you're not able to share it first, you can write it down. If you're not able to be in the camera, you can write it down and then you can post it on social media. It can be anonymous or it can be having your face, whichever one is going to work for you. And then for me, when I was going to be on camera, I just remembered, my style was to use also cartoons because I love children. And I was like, if there's an opportunity of not having a 5 minutes video, but have maybe 3 minutes in a cartoon version, that will be fine because I love cartoon. That'll be like I'm interacting with a place where I'm comfortable with, and I'm engaged in sharing my story with the characters or the environment that is, as they just said, that is safe. But it's really hard to find or define the safetyness spot, because once you're sharing your story, I don't know how you feel it, but you share it, but it can come back to you as a really, really hard something that's going to hurt you. But the thing is that once you know that you're true to yourself, and you know that your story is meant to not harm people, but simply to express the vulnerability or the untapped opportunity that is existing in the bit of the voices that go unheard, that is the one that's going to give you strength, especially when you're starting for the first time. And then as you go, just be able to find different means that's going to help you be comfortable. Like in my experience, just have to work with only one film crew, one camera guy, because I'm still learning to be comfortable on cameras, but I'm like, if I'm going to be sharing the voice, because I believe that I'm just one voice out of the many, but as if the camera is going to be on me, I'm not going to say no, because me sharing my voice, my story, is going to help other young people know that they can speak up to, they can dare to make a change, and they can dare to take action in their own community. Then I don't have to say no, because now it's more like a responsibility of who I am and what I can contribute on. Defining my comfortability is finding a way that is going to work for me, even if others don't understand. But I just need to be able to, go back to sleep at night and not be having nightmare because I was behind the camera, or that because I talked with the journalist. And also the other thing is the power to say no to journalists in their question, because sometimes they can be very hard. But once you understand that your story, you can share it, you are the one who own how it's going to be shared, and you can say no, and people have to respect your no. Even if they don't understand, they just have to respect it.
Yeah, I could see Beja saying yes there and nodding as well. So we've got loads of questions coming through the chat function. We have about 10 more minutes for this panel before we go to our next fireside chat. So we're going to try and do it quickly to get to as many as we can. Deja, I know you've mentioned your past and how hard it was, and I'm sure that also included it was hard to access funding. And there's a question in the chat from Rachel on what advice do you have for young changemakers who don't have access to many resources to execute their ideas? I don't know if you have any thoughts on that and how you did your change, not necessarily having a lot of resources.
Yeah, I mean, that's so real. Young people are being asked to fix issues we didn't create. People love to come up to us and tell us how inspirational we are, how glad they are that the future is in our hands, without putting resources in our hands to truly make those solutions happen. And it is a very frustrating position to be in. So I want to, acknowledge how frustrating and unfair that can feel. And secondly, I want to say that when we feel that we don't have enough, right? I grew up in a community that objectively did not have enough, but we made enough because of community, because of the connections we had. I think back, and my activism really is rooted in this experience of growing up in a community where, when my mom didn't have a job, she might babysit for the neighbors so they could go to work, right? These abilities to create moments of generosity for each other, to create enoughness. And I think it's really about that, right? One, we should be holding our leaders to higher standards and those with resources to redistributing them to young people for those solutions. That is the baseline. But two, in the current reality we are in, that we have enough, that among each other, we can create enoughness. And it's about asking ourselves, who do we have in our network, right? Maybe they have time to give. Maybe they're really talented in some specific way. And how can we mobilize all of the potential around us that exists just within our personal networks?
Thank you, Deja. And thanks also for being very concise with your answer, which allows us to get to a few more. Ineza, I know that there are different challenges for different regions of the world. I saw someone asking about Afghanistan, but there have been a lot of questions about Africa as well, and consistent challenges in engaging young people in remote areas specifically. Do you have any suggestions on how the UN could respond effectively to this problem?
That's a very good question, and let me see if I can answer in short word. So the only way that the UN can address that one, especially reaching youth or community in the remote area, is to stop going there and let the frontline community be the one to go there, because that is the only answer. Because I think in terms of saving resources, saving time, and also being the ability to create homegrown solution, the UN should just only guide how maybe local actors should go there. Because I come from a community where I'm like, if a solution is coming from outside your community, it's not gonna work, it's not gonna last unless it's going to be breathed from the community, be able to be tested within the community, and be developed and implemented within the community. And that's I think that's the simplest answer I can give.
And I think a very true answer. I've had many conversations with people in the development sector, thinking of the development sector as almost the new colonialism, and really, how do we support young people in the front lines who are already leading the change, as opposed to going and imposing a worldview or a way of doing things. So I think your answer was spot on. We've been talking about the UN, and there are different ways to engage the UN, and there are some questions from young people on how can young people really meaningfully engage with the UN. And I think, Deja, you said something fantastic earlier, that we sometimes look at these places or these people as like the place to be. So I do want to highlight, before asking that question, that we don't all have to be at the UN or be interacting with the UN, but for those who want to, what are some suggestions on how to do that?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways. I've always been one of those people that's pushing from the outside in some ways. And I think a lot of young people here can probably relate to that. But I want to remind everyone that each and every day we vote with our likes, with the way that we spend our attention online, right? And I really am someone who's doing a lot of work in the narrative and culture change space, right? So I'm going to come from that angle and say that the UN responds to what's going viral online, right? They are responding to what's popping up in the headlines, and young people are driving that. So follow along with young people who are leading marches, who are leading actions this week and beyond, right? And amplify them. You may not have 1 million followers, but that's really not what's important. If you're engaging and you're amplifying, that is really important work. And a really important service to those organizers who are creating important moments of inciting, right? Where people maybe see the world differently or can understand the need for change. And so I want to encourage everyone, just as a very small action, to follow along with the people that are taking lead this week, particularly the young people, particularly the young women, particularly the young women of color, and to amplify them, support them, be in the comments, right? Share them with your friends, maybe even share them with your friends who aren't as interested in the things you're interested in. Because I like to remind folks that the people who care about you are going to care about what you care about. And sometimes if we just can tap into our own personal networks, that can be really powerful too.
Thank you, Deja. And you mentioned, something great about this week. As you know, this is the curtain raiser for the SDG Summit, which is happening in just a couple days from now. And so many young people will be in New York taking action. We'll make sure to share ways to engage via our social media channels. So please do follow those, and also via the newsletter. There are a couple of events Harshani mentioned at the start. People can join virtually if that's of interest to you. But again, continue taking action in your own context, and as Inez has said before, on what you're comfortable with, right? We don't want to make people take action in a way that they're not comfortable with. And advocacy is, once you've found a cause that you can focus on, can still be something nerve-wracking. And how do you overcome that initial fear of speaking up, I guess, against all people? Was how it was phrased in one of the questions. It was anonymous, so I can't reference the person, but how did you get over that fear, Ineza?
I would say because it is an advocacy, climate change, I get a chance to be part of the Rwandan, like my country negotiation delegation in 2018. And I came to learn that in the climate space, Rwanda was leading with action, was leading with a concrete example, with good policy on how youth, children, and women are included. So when I saw on the international level, that was not there. So that would drive me to speak, because I was able to share my voice from a place of holding the leaders accountable with the backing example on what should be working and how that one should be structured in a manner that's going to be owned by the community, owned by the children, owned by the young people. So that, I think that's where I get the strength. I got the strength for the first time because I was called, like, you know, when you are holding like you have a lighter and they have you are like to channelize so people know that they're in the darkness, but they can choose to have a light and they can see. So I think that is what drives me. And then throughout the years, connected fellow other young people, their sense of hope, because they hope that this was going to be a better place, regardless of how the structure is being put, regardless of how the inequalities is being much more pronounced. You can still find young people who are, you know, dreaming to make this world a better place, and that's also what gave me strength. And the other thing that daily give me strength is the fact that this generation of ours, we are able to stand together as one, because in the UN, I'm sorry to say, but a lot of the time when they say leave no one behind, they don't mean leave no one behind. There's some other people who are being left behind. But when you look with how young people are engaging today, they are able to challenge the system of the UN to really be able to stand in solidarity. And that is also what brings me hope. And that's what gives me courage to keep sharing my voice, keep being present, and keep daring to hope for the future, because I'm also able to go back home and be able to take concrete action that's going to be driving action. Even if it's going to be a small scale action, it counts, because we take all small steps every day towards climate justice or towards the better future that we want to take. And as I said before, it's like we are all part of a big puzzle. If you do your part very correctly, we are going to be making a world a better place in a short time.
Thank you. Thanks to both of you. And I know we're running out of time, so I'm just going to give a last minute for each of you to share any final reflections. We weren't able to get to all the questions, but as I'm seeing the ones that are coming below, they were quite similar. On Tesfahom was asking about how to engage from his country. There was Olawo asking about how can she have advice to speak up. So I think there's a sentiment of young people really wanting to take action. And if you had one thing to say to them on what your final advice would be, what would you like to your parting words to be? Deja, let's start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think my final words is just to get personal. Bodies like the UN can feel really big and far away. Hearing from folks like us, right, when we list these accomplishments, these awards can feel also far away, but the truth is that this work is personal. So if you can think about issues that are personally impacting you, right, where does your life intersect with the things you see in the news or the topics we've talked about today? Ask yourself about where those intersections are and then own them, right? Get really clear on your personal stories. Start by writing them down, like Ineza said, or sharing it in safe places like with your friends or your family, and then scale that work, right? Look at who has the power to make the decisions, to make the changes that you want to see, and bring that story to them, right? Push them. And then finally, really look at your personal network, because nobody is tapped into the exact same relationships that you are, right? And that doesn't mean you have a personal relationship with the highest and the mightiest. It means that you have a personal relationship with your mom that nobody else has, right? You have a personal relationship with your best friend or your partner or your neighbor that nobody else has. And so being able to mobilize those relationships, change those minds, is incredibly powerful and something that only you can do in that way. So I want to encourage everybody here to get personal. I'd also love to stay connected with you all. So you can find me at Deja Fox on Instagram, and I'd love to be a part of your personal network.
Yes, please do add those links in the chat. And Ineza, in 1 minute, what is your final word?
I think Deja said most of what I was thinking to say, but I will say changing the mindset in order to learn that you are limitless. No matter how much limit the world's gonna give you, you are limitless because I just believe that we are all unique in the manner that we are here on a purpose and we're able to shine a light of hope. And it's gonna be hard, but don't let the word define you. You can define the word in simple terms. And we are having an opportunity to define the world to be a better place. And then we can start today and not tomorrow. We couldn't start tomorrow. And I like to say sometimes, like, a lot of time, we young people, we are the leaders of today, but our journey started yesterday. So it's like we already have expertise. We know how to change the narrative. We know how to bring solidarity, bring action. And that's why we're able to see a better future and able to work on it together as one. And thank you so much for the opportunity. And I would like to also stay connected if you guys wish.
Both so much. It's been fantastic to hear from you. And to end with the final question that was asked about how young is it too young to participate in UN programs? It's never too young. And I think the next panel will also speak to that with young people coming, and Taylor will be moderating this discussion. It's been a pleasure. Taylor, I will hand over to you.
Hello to all of the incredible young changemakers on the call. I am incredibly excited to be here with you to dig into our last rapid fire panel. I will just say this last panel, I was so enthralled. I think everyone was. I was watching the chat go absolutely crazy. And it really spoke to one of the upcoming initiatives we also have, which is the Story Lab. So looking at how we can unlock turbocharge progress for the SDGs by really tapping into these compelling stories and engaging people, not just on the statistics, but the emotional, the human level. So I really resonated with so much that was shared by our incredible speakers. Our final panel emphasizes the power of collaboration across generations, building on the tenacity, the creativity, and the vision from our prior speakers. We have two incredible panelists who can represent both sides of this conversation joining us to discuss how we can drive progress through intergenerational solidarity. So we have the incredible Casey Harden, who is the 15th General Secretary of the World YWCA. Casey has been driving the realization of the global YWCA movement's goal to have 100 million young women transforming power structures, which I know so many young people on this call are so passionate about, and tackling the exciting operational governance and partnership opportunities to ensure the vitality and relevancy of the YWCA in the 21st century. We also have Oscar Molander joining us, who is actually a great bridge between our last panel and this one. Oscar started his career as an award-winning artist. Today, he is Sweden's UN Youth Delegate on Human Rights, Goodwill Ambassador for the Swedish UN Association, and part of the Human Rights Watch Sweden's Creators Society, so really bridges that creativity through to advocacy platform. So I'd love to dive straight in. We don't have a huge amount of time together, so we're going to jump through a few different ideas. But Casey and Oscar, both of you are such experts in collaboration across generations, bridging the divides and fostering intergenerational solidarity. I'd love to start by asking, what do you think is the most important skill that you have learnt in being a changemaker in the intergenerational space? Oscar, I'd love to start with you.
Thank you so much. I just want to start off by saying that I'm so grateful to be here, and I was so inspired by the previous panel. That was just amazing. So if I could just give 1% of the wisdom that was shared in the last panel, I will be happy. So yeah, well, I would say that for me, it has been kind of, I would say, to be fearless. For many youth, I think when you get to be a part of the decision-making table, some might feel grateful, which could sometimes take away the feeling that you should know that you should be there. It's logical that you should be there, and for me, it's been boosting me that just remember to be fearless in that situation, and also have the thought of breaking silos, because we often work in silos, and a lot of the times I would say senior decision makers kind of decide what is a youth topic, and that is not right. So we need to kind of get that collective voice of working not in silos, but bridging that divide. So that is also one tool, I think. Maybe I'll stop there.
I think that point that you've drawn out, which is this idea of what's a youth topic, is so central to this conversation, because as the next generation who will inherit all of the topics and all of the decisions made today, it's really important that we break down those silos. We can also see in the poll, and thank you for everyone filling those out. It definitely helps our speakers and everyone else on the call see the general sentiment. We can see there's most of you saying it's so important, it's already happening for young people to be in these spaces and helping in that leadership position. But we do have a bit of a spread across. So Casey, would love to hand to you, what is the skill that you think is most important for intergenerational collaboration?
Yeah, well, hello. And like Oscar said, the prior panel was fantastic. So hopefully we can be as authentic here. And my response is really authentic. I started out as a young leader in a fabulous environment that allowed me to lead. And I think the most important thing is to let go of ego. Not only is a really important characteristic for a leader, but to work intergenerationally and to do it effectively and to be properly reactive and proactive to what's going on around me. Over the years and over the decades, I've really always had to have my ego in check and have assumptions and constructs that I build in check. And I think without a healthy ego, it's really easy to get wrapped up into generational constructs, multilateral system constructs, and all sorts of other constructs of representation that can really undermine the complexity that comes sometimes with intergenerational work.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for those reflections. And this is such a great jumping off point, and also fantastic to hear our speakers enjoyed the prior panel so much. I'd love to jump now into, and I think you've both alluded to this need to let go of ego, and it enables you to be present to the context and the people that you're seeking to collaborate with. So I'd love to ask both of you, context can play such a huge role in intergenerational collaboration. It operates so differently, whether it's within the UN building, whether it's out on the front lines of community action. So I'd love to ask, how does the context influence how we need to approach intergenerational collaboration? Casey, would love to start that question.
Well, it's huge. I mean, it's again, when I talk about constructs and these things that can be barriers or limitations to how we get where we want to go, being aware of context, being sensitive to it, checking oneself, realizing that we have blind spots, I think is such a strong start to any work that we do together in community, or when we're organizing or activating in community or fellowship. When we talk about, in my work with the World YWCA, when we talk about intergenerational leadership, we're always very, very careful to keep in mind that beginning with family of origin, and then community, and then experience, identity, all of those pieces of context have a really, really heavy sway on how we're approaching intergenerational leadership and how others are approaching us. And to not note it, to not be aware of it, really undermines a process of an intergenerational community coming together and getting things done. So it's huge, it's paramount, and it's an excellent question.
Thank you so much, Casey. And Oscar, same question to you.
Yeah, no, it's a huge question, and it's quite difficult maybe to pinpoint something. But I mean, I would say, in my experience, the context of timing is quite important, especially in regards to different UN negotiations and such, for youth, which are usually not having the same availability to access different pre-meetings and such, to be able to get our thoughts into these decision-making rooms and such in time, and is always something that I've experienced is quite difficult. So in the sense of, on the context of timing, I would say that's very important. But also, I mean, just availability to create a space where it's youth can meet senior decision makers on the same terms in the sense of availability. That's also something that I believe can be worked on a lot, especially within the UN system. No, it both have a lot of barriers, but also a lot of opportunities when it comes to context.
Fantastic. Thank you both so much for that. And in a surprise turn of events, so it's always a positive when we have more and more people to hear from, a third panelist who unfortunately wasn't able to make it at the beginning of the call, but is about to rapidly join the conversation for this last little bit of time we have together, is Jerome Foster, who is the youngest ever White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council member, advising President Joe Biden. So Jerome, apologies for so rapidly bringing you in and putting you on the spot, but as you get spotlighted, would love to pose that same question to you with regards to context, because I know that you have also co-founded your own charity, Wake Up, which really focuses on helping to mobilize and empower young people. So you've worked on the grassroots level with young people directly, as well as within the walls of the White House. And so hopefully you're about to appear on the screen, but would love to pose that question to you of how context impacts your approach to intergenerational collaboration.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm traveling at the moment, so apologies for the background and all the setup behind me. But yeah, I think when it comes to context and environmental justice, and especially when we talk about issues of like solutions and how do we make sure that we're tackling the climate crisis in a way that tackles systems at scale, it's always thinking about how do we make sure that disadvantaged communities and communities have the ability to basically be able to have consent, and also another measure in which they're able to input directly into all processes of decision making. I think a lot of what's transformed the work that has happened with young people is that we've had the context of young people growing up and experiencing the aftermath of 9/11, the 2008 financial crisis, and so many other economic and social justice issues, such as like Black Lives Matter, and that kind of framed the way in which you think about social justice as being not just about, well, climate change is going to impact my house, or I'm a woman, so I'm going to also face sexism, or I'm Black and I also face racism. But there are also these intersections in which we exist as human beings. And I think that allows us to come to the table and say, hey, I can think about, as a young person, the carbon capture technology you're trying to propose in Louisiana right now will leak 20 years from now because you're not thinking about the entire life cycle of it. And that context allows us to think about long-term solutions and not just band-aids that kind of skirt around the root issues of the climate crisis, and which is the systems that make up a kind of model in which right now the biggest thing that we need to see is that shift from prioritizing like the way in which we take from people in a way in our economy, and prioritizing how we give, because there is an economic model for giving to communities, but there's always an economic model for taking and selling to someone else. I think that's the biggest shift in the context frame that we have to kind of emerge from.
Thank you so much, Jerome. And I think this group is exceptionally well placed to speak to this next question, which has come from Matilda through the Q&A. And it's about thinking about more and more we're seeing young people brought into these rooms, whether it's the White House, the UN, working with the YWCA. But I think we all know very strongly that this is done sometimes better than others. So how can we distinguish between effective and powerful youth engagement versus just being in the room? And how can we advocate more effectively for better, more meaningful youth engagement? Oscar, I'd love to start with you on that one.
Yeah, well, I would say youth washing in general is quite common, unfortunately. And how I see it is that usually youth are brought in for consultations, but we're not part of the implementation and most likely not part of the evaluation either. And then it makes it very hard to know if what you have been saying in the consultation part has actually been considered. So in that sense, I think usually when youth are brought in to actually be part of the implementation phase and the evaluation phase as well, I think that usually makes it more meaningful. Yeah.
Casey, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Oscar's right, and that the reality is that oftentimes the request for youth engagement or the opportunity isn't as deep and wide as it should be, as we want it to be. So I mentioned before, I started as a youth leader, so I've got all sorts of really jaded and also idealistic opinions still about intergenerational leadership. And I find that most often I have more don'ts than do's when I think about it, and that I hold myself accountable to in working in an intergenerational environment. And a lot of it, those don'ts are so important. And an example is when we're looking at being in co-leadership with between intergenerational ages and the YWCA, one of the questions we ask ourselves is this a one-off? How do we work with our colleagues so that actually they are able to sustain their leadership within the initiative or the conversation or the debate or whatever it is for a sustained period of time, so that there's actually ownership from the beginning to the end. And so the don't not do that, right? Don't have it be a one-off. So I think that when we talk about intergenerational leadership, and it's still so new, there's so many people, it is like the latest thing. The YWCA has been doing it for a really long time, which is why we'll be publishing a paper soon on it and so on. But you really need to start with the don'ts. So I think that most important is for an organization to decide from the beginning and set values and principles. And I say this in a lot of settings. If you've got the values and principles around it, all the don'ts and the do's get taken care of in time. But if you start with just a plan or an action plan or quotas, I don't think it gets you very far. I think it's all about values, principle, and mindset, and then just checking oneself, checking the organization really consistently in perpetuity.
So much of what you just said I've heard, and you're one of the incredible leaders within the Unlock the Future Coalition. I've heard it from so many other organizational leaders there, both the long history of youth leadership and then having that jaded and hopeful approach. And I saw quite a few nods from both Jerome and Oscar in that. I think it's a shared sentiment. And also that idea of really having values and principles at the heart, because then the logistics can flex to the realities of the situation and the heart will stay consistent. Whereas if we just have those structures in place, it can become a bit fickle. So I think that's such a great point that you've made. Now, as we enter the last 5 minutes that we have together, I want to make sure that we're not rushing this last question, because it really, I think, is at the heart of what so many of the young change makers on this call are thinking about. We can tell there's so much energy on this call. There's so many young leaders wanting to do something, wanting to take action. And so the question I'd like to pose to each of you is, what is the action that you would encourage young change makers to take today? And especially keeping in mind that some of them may not have the resources available to them or may not have the doors of the UN immediately open to them. But what is that action that you would encourage them to start taking today? Jerome, I'd love to start with you.
Thank you. I think that question is really crucial. Like, I think for myself, I've not always been in a position like this. I was just like always organizing in my community, and like trying to figure out how I can raise my voice about the climate crisis. But I feel like most of my generation is also in this feeling of like this valley of sadness and that pit of like anxiety that they're feeling right now. Is like, how can we do something that really makes impact on the climate crisis? And I remember watching the documentary by Leonardo DiCaprio, Before the Flood. And after that, he said, all you need to do is to volunteer and use whatever passion you currently have and whatever skill that you naturally want to wake up in the morning and do, use that in a way that progresses change. And for me, I was a programmer and I built websites every day and just sat on my computer for like extended periods of time, like 10 to 12 hours. And like, I was like coding like 3D designs, 3D characters, and like virtuality environments. And I went from that point to creating VR environments about social justice. I think that's a really good lesson to learn, is that like whatever you can do, you can support this movement by just figuring out, like going online and filling out a form. Like I got involved with like climate striking and organizing by going on 0 Hours website, which is a youth organization based in the US, and asking to volunteer. And from that point on, they taught me how to organize, how to fundraise, how to get elected officials' attention, how to pass policy. And that just came from other young people coming together and saying, hey, enough is enough. And we're going to volunteer in any way we can to take like either 10 minutes, 10 hours, however much time you have to really make an impact. And my organization, Wake Up, is doing that again in 2024 to mobilize 1 million young people to register to vote. And also using the power of media of like student journalists and people who can just volunteer 5 minutes to just like help grassroots organizations to plant trees and make real big solutions that are beyond just like the typical ones that we see. But yeah, I think just figure out a way to use your passion for social justice.
That's fantastic. And I think you've really echoed what Deja shared in the prior panel, which is use what you have, the community you have, and the opportunities. I think the point you also made about the valley of sadness, I resonate with that deeply. And it's one of the big reasons we've created the Engine Room, is to have a space for young leaders to come together, to forge connections, and to be supportive in what can be a really challenging journey. Oscar, would love to know what action you encourage young change makers to take.
Yeah, well, I might build on what's been already said. I think action would be to either you're already part of a group or a collective, and then really mobilize and try to reach out to as many people as you can, because I think there's a lot of people kind of reinventing the wheel over and over again. And then it also, and when you're doing it on your own, that's also when it becomes that engagement don't always become healthy. We need to be a collective. And I think in that sense, either join a collective if you're not part of it in any sense of association and such, or if you're already part of it, try to get more to join in. And just remember that this is something that we do together. It's not a sprint. It's gonna unfortunately be a marathon. So we need to help each other.
And last but certainly not least, Casey, what is your suggested action?
Yeah, so my suggested action is to really go with your gut, to really just get centered and grounded and vibe with your gut. And here's why. Because especially as we talk about the UN system, I talked before about constructs and being jaded, but there's still a lot of really good things going on. And there are constructs that are movable. And you have to go with your gut, because there are parts of the work and the systems and member states, and they're immovable. But there are parts that are movable and they are open, and there are leaders of all ages that are just very eager to work with us and to hear us and to join with us. And it can be really difficult to navigate working in a system that often is a very good place for folks that that do not walk away from it because they're possibly their motives or the change that they're trying to make isn't in line with the changes that we've been talking about today. So, but you can't let that become too sad. You can't let it become overwhelming. You can't let one bad apple define your experience in the UN, because there are a lot of really incredible individuals there. But if you don't use your gut, if you don't stay grounded in the system, I think it's really easy to float off and lose your tethers and even possibly lose where you even started in the first place. And I think that stands whether you're 17 or 70 or 47. And that is definitely my call to action to each of us, is to stay grounded, stay centered, and to go with our gut and keep doing what we do.
Fantastic. And I'm pleased to share that the poll that I saw coming through and everyone filling that out, a lot of you are thinking all of the above. Let's do everything that's available to us. So I find that encouraging, and it certainly resonates with what our wonderful panelists have shared about, yes, it's challenging, but be hopeful and find the opportunities that you can. I think the three big takeaways that I'm taking from what you've just shared is, I loved your phrasing, Casey, vibe with your gut. So number one, really tune into yourself, stay grounded. Number two, don't be afraid to reach across generations, even if you do have exchanges that are challenging, even if every attempt does not go perfectly. The future requires intergenerational solidarity, so we need to continue striving that direction. And also don't forget the power of connection and community. The state of our world feels anxiety-inducing at times, and it's only through that community that we will be able to have sustainable advocacy as young leaders or even as more seasoned leaders as well. So I'd love to thank our incredible panelists for your time, for your wisdom. I hope you've been watching the chat to see how appreciated your insights have been. And I will now hand to Hashani, who will round us out with a few final calls to actions and opportunities from here.
Thank you so much, Taylor, and thank you to all our powerful, our incredible leaders and speakers on this call. That was phenomenal. I was just blown away. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And what is so clear from hearing from all of you is it's time to get moving on the SDGs and get this job done. We're not just aiming for the minor, small victories. We're going for the home run. We're looking for strong wins for young people just like you. And how do we reach these goals? Well, it starts with us thinking, planning, and acting for the future as leaders of today and leaders of tomorrow. We're not just working for the years ahead, but all the way up to 2100. That's a vision that spans your whole lifetime, the lives of your children and the lives of your great-grandchildren. We want to instill hope for change. And to do that, we're creating a special space called the Engine Room for the Future. On this slide, you'll see some of the moments we're targeting to influence the global system with your ideas. Think of this as a hub where different generations can come together to talk, share ideas, disagree even, but come together and learn from each other. But this isn't just about talking. It's about empowering you to take the lead and to drive action at a local level, at a national level, and even at a global level. The Engine Room for the Future is a place where you can design your own roadmap to 2100. It's a place where your voices are heard, your ideas matter, and your vision for the future can become a reality. As part of the journey, we have some big news coming your way. The United Nations Foundation, us, and the Council on Energy, Environment, and Water in India are launching the Next Generation India Fellowship. If you're from India and you're under 30 and you're passionate about challenges like public health, sustainability, future of work, digital disruption, or gender equality, or you're an artist, this is for you. This 2-year fellowship will give you a chance to discuss One Future, the theme of the G20 presidency, and engage with global leaders, policymakers, and influencers. You'll have an incredible opportunity to publish research on the future of India in the world 2100 and share your thoughts directly with leaders. Imagine the incredible impact you could have. You'll also be part of building a youth-led network and platforms, not just in India, but spanning the global South and the world. You'll get a chance to communicate your ideas and forge collaborations across borders. And guess what? This amazing initiative is supported by the Murthy family. So if you're ready to shape the future, check out our Instagram for more details on how to apply. And there are a number of ways you can join this movement and support the Engine Room for the Future. And you can see some of those on the slide. You can sign up to the Engine Room to be part of the roadmap in 2100. You can attend any of our SDG Summit events in a couple of days in person or on UN TV. You can tag our future agenda and share your Engine Room challenge to world leaders. And you can join us at COP28 in a similar setting, just like this, coming up on the 23rd of November. So that's a wrap, guys. You've joined us for almost 2 hours. That's hard to believe, but we thank you so much for your time, your energy, your commitment, your enthusiasm to help drive the SDGs, to help deliver change, not just for you, not just for your local communities, but for your families and for generations to come. There are ways that you can continue to stick with us on this journey, and we really encourage you to do that precisely by scanning some of these codes on the screen. And if you have any questions to us, feel free to reach out anytime to our young leaders on our program at UN Foundation, notably Inez and Taylor. And a big shout out to my team. Thank you so much for your hard energy and support. That's a shout out to Louis, Danley, Pele, and Rochelle. Thank you so much, everyone, for supporting us on this journey. And you'll hear from us soon in a couple of days on how the SDG Summit went.